And this is the Fat Man Jam, and we are revisiting the GDW, Game Designers Workshop's Twilight 2000 series. This particular module is called Gateway to the Spanish Main. Let's see, copyright 1987, 2 years after I graduated high school. There we go. Gateway to the Spanish Main, and you think you finally hit rock bottom with nowhere left to fall. The refuge collapses on your head. Sergeant Major Terrace left us that happy thought as the KGB led him away from the POW cage for being held in. I figure that's all she wrote. It's Siberia for sure. Okay. This particular module has some interesting alternate possibilities for the game. One of the examples, it makes the premise that at the end of the previous campaign module, adventure series, or whatever it was, that perhaps somewhere something went south and the character party has become captured by the KGB or the Russians or some other belligerent hostile entity and are been stripped of pretty much everything but their very personal items and their clothing, and were confined aboard a prison ship, and then were destined to be sent to behind the lines, so to speak, and somehow or another the ship either founders or sinks, or they manage to escape in a short boat or what have you, and then are rescued by the USS Constitution regenerated. Now, the other alternate would be, of course, up to the GM to remodify that in some way, so perhaps they get aboard the ship in another manner that doesn't involve being rescued at sea. And the opportunity here, of course, is if the character party has accumulated a lot of personal wealth, so to speak, equipment, what have you, this is a great opportunity to reboot them in some aspects, or to alleviate them of their burden and their encumbrance problems. Of course, that can always set off a lot of upset and irate players, make them agitated because they spend a lot of time and effort gaining all that loot. Another alternate possible use for this particular module would be if at some point in any of the previous game modules or adventures that you've created that things went south and they failed in their mission and got captured, this was an opportunity to continue the adventure with their characters instead of having their characters basically disappear into some Siberian gulag or just put up against a wall and shot. I mean, that's a different kind of take on things. So it says here, morning, I pulled myself up and staggered up the strange ladder to the deck. Broad daylight, and I wasn't dreaming. I sat down against the bulkheads and gape-jawed astonishment. The deck was rough planks. Above my head fluttered 100 acres of canvas. The ship had 3 masts and square scales, no smokestack. I pulled myself to the gunwale and clung to the rigging. I was standing between 2 antique naval cannons on 4-wheeled wooden carriages. I lurched across the deck where this tall blonde woman in tight blue jeans was manning the ship's wheel. I had asked, "What ship is this?" She just grunted and tossed her thumb in the direction of the ship's bell. I read the USS Constitution, 1987. I squinted at her in the bright tropical sun and asked, "Admiral Farragut, I presume?" The Gateway to the Spanish Main is a game module for the use of GW's World War II or III role-playing game Twilight 2000, set around the replica of the U.S. Constitution built in 1987 by Paradox Studios. Players will become crew members aboard a sailing vessel and eventually be plunged into a plot of treachery, kidnapping, piracy in the Caribbean islands, a geographical region once known as the Spanish Main. Gateway to Spanish Main contains rules for traveling by sail-powered vessels at sea and for seagoing combat in Twilight 2000, deck plans for a replica of the USS Constitution, maps for Grenada and Caracol, and the description of these islands, their towns, villages, so on and so forth. So, at this point, perhaps our stalwart adventure slash soldiers have gotten through the Going Home campaign book, have gotten on one of the last transports out of the Dodge, and the transport sinks. And maybe it gets attacked, maybe the weather. I like my weather. Perhaps the weather caused the ship to founder, and they were forced into the lifeboats. Perhaps they missed the boat, and they were venturing in the last submarine series, and the submarine series ends poorly. The Soviets managed to sink the Corpus Christi somehow, and our players once again find themselves pretty much destitute with just the personal stuff on their back, so to speak, floating at sea. Perhaps then their efforts, in their adventures in the British Isles have gone south, and they've had to steal a rowboat and get away, and found themselves adrift at sea. The list is endless for opportunities here. So basically what we have here is a movie replica of a ship. It's a modern version of the USS Constitution, built on the blueprints of the original blueprints of the USS Constitution, as much as realistically as possible. That meant there are some engines, there are some lights, there are some plastics and metals and things, better construction materials that are in the build of the ship itself, but the ship is still considered a seagoing sailing vessel of its era. It is completely remodeled for the majority parts to resemble the USS Constitution, and built almost identically to the original, wherever its safety reasons would allow them to have done it. Then it was staffed with a crew, and according to the story, it was in the South Pacific, or in the South Atlantic, or something to that effect, or South Africa, pursuing a movie when the war broke out. And there you have that. And so it starts out with, they pulled us out of the drink and did what they could for us. I must have been really out of it. All I remember is that Mickey died that night anyway. At least we were out of that death ship. This morning I pulled myself up, staggered up the strange ladder. Yeah, I already said that part. Campaign region. It says, assume the characters have survived many adventures in Europe or elsewhere, including possibly ordeals of capture and shipwreck. Referee may assume that the characters are being shipped as part of a possible prisoner exchange. Vessel and its country origins, its nationalities of the crew, and the identity of the submarine that sank their floating prisoner, all unimportant, and the information would probably be unavailable to prisoners anyway. As survivors, they will have little more than brains, guts, and hard-won experience going for them, armed with only filthy battle dress uniforms, BDUs, a burning desire to get home, and a complete set of minor bruises, cuts, and blah, blah, blah. Not their hardware to solve. The players are going to have to rely on themselves, not their hardware, to solve their problems. Since they were captured, stripped of the weapons, equipment, torpedoes, and shipwrecked, is too traumatic for the players to deal with, or if the referee is too kind-hearted to separate the players from their hard-earned equipment. There is a separate session following the details of some less traumatic ways of getting on board the Constitution. And it gives you some of what I just did a rundown. Getting on board from the Western Europe campaign, going home from Poland after the Krakow, prior to this, the Black Madonna, from the Middle East, or the RDF source book. From the Texas Red Star Lone Star campaign, or from New York's Armies of the Night, which we have yet to review, and we will get to. Gives us the history of Old Ironsides, the original, and the history of the USS Constitution, 1987. Building Paradox Studios Old-Fashioned Patriot. PS replica of the 54-gun USS Constitution built in Nova Scotia during traditional, nearly forgotten techniques. Pretty much everything I just already told you. What's real, what's plastic. We got our crew, the captain, first mate. This is a very interesting group of NPCs. I can tell you that right now. It's the very sort of people you want. If you're in a post-apocalyptic scenario and everybody's more or less got to pull their weight, and all their various quirks meld into a very well established group of people conducting the adventure. Theoretically speaking, the gist of this particular adventure is that your characters are rescued, and the captain and crew of the Constitution don't owe allegiance to any one individual or organization or government, nor are they considered pirates. They are conducting business as best they can. They're trying to get back to their home base where they were basing out of before the war. And I can't tell you off the top of my head where it's at. It's in here somewhere. Along the way, they're picking up cargoes and passengers. And whenever opportunity presents itself, Captain Karastidstand, I can't pronounce her name, but she's always on the lookout for rescuing U.S. and NATO soldiers or sailors who find themselves in a bad spot and are in the need for a ride home, and the intentions of getting them home, as well as flushing out her crew. The ship of this size actually needs several hundred, 300 plus members to actually run it efficiently. Fully staffed, it will be over 300. It takes a minimum of 20 or so to just to do the bare minimum. And anything less than that, you can't get them out. You can't get this thing into the sea, and it's very dangerous to operate it with bare minimum crew. So ideally speaking, there's no big huge world-ending scenario here or great load of loot to be found, but there's a lot of other opportunities, especially exploring another section of war-torn Mother Earth. Life aboard Old Ironsides, life aboard the Constitution, setting the watches, what they mean, special notes on ship routine, and a breakdown of the daily routine. One of the things that the ship's scrounger Supercargo Thad Bentley. Lieutenant Thaddeus Repost Bentley is an irreplaceable man aboard the Constitution. Thad Bentley is an authentic American and I never can pronounce that. Entrepreneur, can never pronounce that word. Pulled off the deal that got the Old Ironsides as machine guns and blah. So he's the ship's scrounger and wheeler and dealer. So they stripped out most of the gun decks fake cannons, and they left the top decks fake cannons in place for visual impression, and they replaced them with a buttload of Maud Deuces. So we got M2 heavy machine guns, and a lot of them. I can only imagine how much ammo these things this ship would go through if it was engaging in combat on a regular basis, which it tries very hard not to do. It just doesn't. I think there's a lot of good information in here on the actual ship, the ship's handling and stuff, how it's built, and what it can do in this environment. So if you're into this post-apocalyptic gaming kind of thing, this stuff here is valuable for other game systems as well. I'm just saying, right? We got encounters at sea, encounters in the Caribbean only, small craft, man-made encounters, sailing ship seaman skill. This talks about this additional extra skill. Adventure plots, piracy, occupation, Grenada. And I know why they picked Grenada at the time they created this. We'd gone through the U.S. military and the Marine Corps basically had liberated Grenada from the Cubans, and it was fresh in the occupied minds of everybody at the time. So it was natural for somebody to tap into it, exploit it. I think it makes for some interesting stuff. So the war, as suggested, their Cubans are still entrenched in a small portion of their military is still stuck there on Grenada and really would like to go home. They're not really inclined to get involved in a fight Life and occupied Grenada today as of December 1st, 2000. The player's arrival. Grenada Gray Rangers are a group of old men, mostly gray and or bald ahead, who came across these islands first in 83 as invaders. The player's arrival. The strongbox venture plot. There's the blueprints of the ship itself. The map of Grenada. Life of Grenada. Rumors. Lots of rumors about pirates. Imagine that. The notorious criminal Bloody Bunny Woolsey has risen from her grave and is terrorizing the islands again. Cannibalism broke out in St. George. Pirates hold Hog Island with over 750 men. A sunken Spanish treasure galleon has been found off of the tours. Special encounters. Brief descriptions of the various towns and villages and points of interest on the island. The larger towns. Hog Island, St. George, the forts, Grand Anse, the wreck of the AB Bazooka. So pretty much once you got on board, they're going to take you. Here's Carico. You're going to go to the Caribbean islands and do some adventuring on the Spanish Main. Carico has been extensively developed by the French before it finally came to rest along Grenada firmly within the grasp of British land. The island Carico, to distinguish from the many small islands around it, was once extensively cultivated by the French and then the English for indigo and sugarcane. Great plantation houses were built, and the island was dotted with windmills. Veterans revolt of the slaves, following 3 decades later, their emancipation in 1833 by the British, finished off the great plantations on the island. So the nearby Grenada is rich in teak and mahogany. Sea Island grows cotton, or Sea Island cotton grows wild here, could be cultivated. Cistern Point Lighthouse, Cragstown, the Harbury Vale, the Hermitage. Hillsborough, Prospect, Windward organizations, the Carico Pirates, the Cubans, the Grenadan Constabulary, the Grenadan Grey Rangers, the New National Party, and some various personalities to explore. There you have that. Gateway to the Spanish Main.